Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And as per usual, before we start, may I remind you, if you find this podcast useful, entertaining, interesting, fun, then please do share it with a friend, colleague, or a family member maybe. And also don't forget to click subscribe or follow whichever platform you're listening to this. It helps a lot, it makes this podcast grow, and it shows me that I'm doing the right job. And also, if you would like to support me in any other way, whether financially or just a pat and back kind of thing, then please do follow the link below. There is an option to subscribe to a newsletter, and I will not be spamming or anything. I will, if anything, just maybe reach out to you and send you some freebies that I've been using, for example, in a PDF form. And as well, if you'd like to support me, just let me know that I'm doing great or you're enjoying the podcast, then please do so. It means a lot to me, and obviously for all of you guys that are out there that are already supportive, thank you so much. It means the world to me, and I am here to stay. So nevertheless, I will still be broadcasting and growing this little audible adventure of my own. Now, today, I thought I'll finish my 12th season, which was all about the different books that I've had a chance to read over the past few months. And funnily enough, I've hit the mark today of 25 books read this year, which means I'm well on the way of getting to 52, as I did the year before and the previous year as well. And I do encourage you to do the same. Reading books is really a marvelous little adventure on its own. But I thought I'll make this episode a little bit different. So as you may note already, there is only one book of mine here in the bottom, which is because I actually picked up the second one. This is the book that I've written recently, and I've published on the 23rd of April, which was the third year anniversary of publishing this little fella here. And even though I didn't do an episode of a podcast before dedicated to that book, I thought, well, why don't I tell you something about this one? Maybe to encourage you to get it for yourself, maybe just to share with you my journey of writing and self-publishing, and maybe just to have a little bit of a different episode, I guess. Because over the past 9 weeks, we've been talking about quite heavy stuff, quite a few books that are probably not the easiest to encounter and engage with, and also a few lighter ones. But for the most part, we've been talking about books that have been written by major authors and major fields and very important ones, apart from, I think, 2 or 3 which were a bit more on the lighter side. Now, I don't want to demean my writing. I do believe it to be quality, but of course, ultimately, it is a writing done by a 27-year-old instead of a 52-year-old expert in, for example, the science of highly improbable, like as we've seen last week. Anyhow, I thought it might be interesting, and if you've already encountered the book, maybe you've already read it, then well done. Thank you so much for your support. If you've been a part of the campaign I've had around the date of my book launching, and you've contributed towards this success, or at least prayed for it, thank you so much again. And I thought I'll share with you a little bit of this book. And so I've taken some notes, funnily enough. It's interesting when you take notes of what you're going to talk about from your own book. And you might think it's quite easy to be chatting about your own stuff, but as much as I find it okay, I wouldn't say it's easy, because ultimately I don't remember everything that is written there. And I don't know which one aspect or which few aspects should I focus on. So I've taken a note. It's quite a short note, and I've left myself quite a bit of space to exercise some creativity here. And I'll start by giving you a background to how this book came about, because I think that's actually quite interesting. And at the beginning of the book itself, I do mention it briefly, but I just wanted to elaborate on that and maybe give you a little bit of a taster of how did this come about. So, if you remember, if you've been with this podcast 2 years back, or maybe you've had a chance to listen to the episodes that were recorded in 2022, I've been on quite an adventure. I went to Kuwait in June 2022, and I've stayed there for 9 months, more or less. I think just about 9 months, which was basically a project in a business journaling kind of thing. I was interviewing CEOs, ministers of the local economy, and many different industry branches. And I've had a partner in crime, Agustina, who was my sort of salesperson. I was the interviewer slash editor, which basically meant I was preparing for the interviews, lining them up, and then conducting them and writing them down, while Agustina was there with me to sell some advertisements and basically make the whole magazine a bit more commercially viable. And it was for a company called The Business Year. Feel free to check them out. The edition that I was participating with was Kuwait 2023 edition, because we would do the research in a yearly advance and then sort of publish it the year later. Now, when I went to Kuwait, it was just after a big crisis I've had in terms of my employment. I've lost quite a few clients when I was freelancing at the beginning of 2022, and a few other things fell through, and so I was in quite a dire state, let's say. And for the most part, by that point, it's been around a year since I've written my first book and self-published it. And so going to Kuwait, I was aware that writing for me is a sort of maybe a sort of an armor of a sort, maybe some sort of therapy as well. So I continued with my podcast. I actually recorded a really interesting series of webinars with my then mentor Florin, which you may find on my YouTube channel. I can put the link below as well for that. And I was quite active when I was in Kuwait, even though I was quite busy with work. And I would say quite busy does not really express it all. It was one of the hardest jobs I've had a chance to experience. It was very intense. There was a little, if any, room for relax and sort of recuperation. We worked and lived together, which added to the stress of the situation. And basically, if it wasn't for a certain morning routine that I've established for myself early on, I would probably be in much more dire state after that adventure. It was quite frankly a bit too much. So obviously, everyone experiences things differently. I don't think I am the first one to say that living and working with the same person is a bit of a stretch. And even more so, I've actually lived and worked with my manager for around 2 months, which you can imagine was even more intense and quite frankly absurd. I would never wish on anyone such a turn of events. It was very, very difficult for me, and I just found myself quite distraught early on, but I've decided to sort of pull through. It was the idea that unless I stay till the end of the project, I will not get paid as much as this job entitled me to. So it was very much so a reason to stay. So I just considered it as a sort of an adventure, maybe a mission, a deployment, if you will, and I just continued. So because of that stress and because of my wish to continue with my efforts to write, and at the time I had a vision of writing a book for children, which I still do have. I've attempted multiple times to start a story for children, and every time it's sort of either whittled out or maybe got turned into something else. And this is exactly what happened to A Letter to Yourself. So initially, and in the first chapter, I actually do include the original of that mindfulness book for children I wanted to write. I've attempted to explain to a younger mind what does it mean to feel aware of your body, and I would encourage a certain number of exercises that are potentially helping you to become more grounded and aware of your surroundings, and as well just to be more acquainted with yourself, which initially, as I said, for the first, I think, 3 or 4 pages of my manuscript was actually a book for children, let's say 6 to 12 kind of range. But then life happened, right? So I very early on realized that this writing that I'm doing every morning, and my morning routine, as I've mentioned before in the episode called My Kuwaiti Adventure, my morning routine consisted of getting up, going for an early morning walk down the beach. I would meditate at the beach, I would do the breathing exercises from Wim Hof, and then I would come back home, do a bit of stretching, and sit down to write with a cup of coffee. That was every morning for 9 months I would do. And that's what kept me sane, I would argue, especially that I felt quite lonely there. Especially later on when our sort of work-related affairs became more and more entangled, and we've not seen eye to eye anymore with my coworker. So I sat down again and again in the morning and just wrote. I've started writing short stories, which I really appreciate, and actually short stories is what the Unusual Stories book is all about. It's just a book filled with short stories from different aspects and perspectives of my ordinary, unusually ordinary life. And this is also the reason for the podcast, the title of the podcast, Unusual Stories, stems from the stories I've been writing since, I think, 2019. And especially throughout the pandemic, I started writing them more often, more intensely, and then decided I might as well start a blog, start publishing, and then podcast happened. So that was this book's story. Now, this book story was more like I would write a story and then I would ponder it. And through those stories, I would deal with the stresses and situations of my everyday experiences in Kuwait, while also reflecting on what helped me and what held me throughout my recent years. And I must say, guys, and in no boastful way, I do feel very humble about it, at the same time noticing just how much impact it had on my life. I've introduced a certain number of habits on a regular basis, about which many times I've mentioned on the podcast, especially in the episode called Habits, or in the morning routines, that really changed my life. And this kind of sentence is quite a cliche. I bet you can just Google "this changed my life" and you'll find hundreds of thousands of things, quick fixes and schemes to make your life better. Of course, this is very, very personal. For me, the biggest game changer was taking control of my morning. And especially in Kuwait, it became very visible for me just how important this morning hygiene of the mind and the body was for me. So sitting every morning after having a bit of a stretch, some meditation and breathing, I would really dive deep into reflecting on what actually meant for me this well-being state. And as I mentioned, initially I thought I had this arrogant thought that I'll be able to put it to words for children to comprehend, but very quickly it transformed into my own discussion with myself about the things that are happening. And because we all think and talk in stories, even right now, as I'm sharing with you a story of this book, I am telling a bunch of different intertwined stories that become a story in itself. I found that it helped me navigate my emotional, psychological, and sort of, let's say, mental, spiritual state of being during that adventure, which was not the easiest one. And I've already mentioned it, and if you'd like to see it for yourself, sort of hear it for yourself, then please do follow one of the links below. I'll mention about the Kuwaiti adventure. Now, the aim of the book changed very quickly, right? So initially it was supposed to be for kids. Very quickly I've decided, well, this is not going to be for kids, and I didn't even know if it's going to be a book, but it became a sort of self-therapy and a dialogue with myself about issues that really mattered for me. So after writing, I think 5 or 6 chapters, I realized that this could be a sort of a guide, or maybe a little bit more practical, focused self-development, self-help book for someone like me in a similar position, or at least in a similar stage of life, to navigate their troubles. And because those stories that I tell there are quite universal, and many of them are not really true, or are not fully true, let's say, they're sort of a fiction mixed with non-fiction ideas, I thought I might create a book out of it that would serve as a sort of a help for people in a similar situation. And therefore the subtitle for the book is Message of Care from One Friend to Another. I befriended myself in a way through those pages. So very quickly I realized that the most important thing about my successful overcoming of many things in my life over the past few years is forming good self-discipline habits, and while wiping my slate clean of the bad habits, introducing the ones that really did matter and made my life better long term. So after that, I thought, well, I might as well help myself find direction going forwards. And this is just a side note. As you might hear from my Kuwaiti adventure episode, I did not stay for another project with the business year. This was for multiple reasons. Some of them I will not be discussing here or anywhere in public ever. But for the most part, I just found that job to be too intense and not necessarily as rewarding as I would expect it to be. And I'm quite curious as a person and quite ambitious, but I'm not keen on being used merely for monetary gain. And there seemed to be a culture in the company that just promoted just gaining money. The only thing that mattered was how much you can bring for the company in monetary form. Otherwise, just kind of quiet and sit there and don't talk, don't do anything out of the ordinary because they're not interested in you. And I do believe, it's a very different. Some people like it, some people don't mind it. For me, it was too much. And so I did leave after that project was done and dusted, which is another story, I guess. Now, I thought I'll help myself find direction going forwards, and therefore a latter part of the book deals with some tools, ideas, and theories that might help you or myself in that situation find the right set of action points or directions that would help me going forward, whether by pivoting my career or becoming a better boyfriend or becoming a better sports person, whatever you'd like it to be. Basically, establishing some goals, creating a set of values and ideas that will help you lead a meaningful life, and then putting it all into action. So if you do wonder at this point, maybe you're just about to finish uni, or maybe you're just about to start uni, or maybe you're just about to quit a job, or you've just been fired, it might be quite useful for you to look into those chapters, because it is quite a usual situation and we will have to pivot and change multiple times in our lifetime. So being ready for it and maybe even embracing the changing state of the world around us might be quite an empowering little statement to make. Now, I thought I'll sort of contribute to this episode 2 major chapters, which for me I find them to be quite unusual for the books I know thus far. And maybe because of these chapters you might want to check out the book. If not, at least listening to this episode, you will gain the benefit of these 2 being something maybe unusual, because maybe you've not had a chance to explore those ideas before. The first one is Where Attention Goes, and this chapter I've dedicated to acknowledging just how much of our intention and energy becomes crucial, and the way we point it becomes crucial to what we get out of life. So there is a phrase from Deepak Chopra, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, I believe, which the episode is there for you to explore, is where attention goes, energy flows. And second phrase being attention energizes, intention transforms. And these are really, really basic but also crucial points that and I would encourage you to explore for yourself in your life. This is something that definitely changed a lot of aspects of my life over the course of the past, let's say, 6 years or so. The idea here basically is that if I tell you right now to look around the room and remember all the red things that you see there, and then close your eyes, and I would ask you, what green things have you seen? You will struggle to come up with any, because you've put your attention, and intention for that matter, on something else. But then the upside to it is, the more you focus on certain aspect, for example, noticing red things in the world, the more of them you see. So this is why, for example, and I like to call it a confirmation bias of an advantage, or an advantageous confirmation bias. That's something that I've written down for myself, is if, for example, every day I tell myself that the world is filled with opportunities for me to grow, to become better, to become happier, to become healthier, and I can feel them becoming a part of my life every day, even though for some time it will feel like faking till you make it, you will rewire your brain to notice more of those things, because you will basically subconsciously convince yourself that it is beneficial for you to notice an opportunity when it shows up for you. There is an interesting paradox that you can observe if you are, for example, right now in a committed relationship versus back, if you look back at your time when you were not in a committed relationship. Maybe you were just trying to, or not even trying, but you were potentially a potential bachelor or bachelorette up for grabs. There is this phenomenon that the moment you have a committed relationship, because by that point you know that there is a possibility for you to be in a relationship. Well, obviously there is, because you are already in a relationship with someone. You might notice more of people around you being interested in you and noticing their interest in you, because you've opened up this horizon of perspectives for you that is there available. You've proven to yourself that you're a quality mate for someone, and because of it, you notice more of the opportunities out there because of that. Even though they might have always been there, it's just the matter that because back in the day when you were alone, let's say, when you were flying solo, you did not think fully, let's say, you had no proof that it is possible for you to find a quality relationship, you would miss, literally unnotice, the opportunities that are out there for you. You might not notice that someone is interested in you because the social cues that would take were just unknown for you at the time. And it works very similar with other things. This is an experiment that you can do with yourself anytime, any day. It's like, for example, if your mother or father drives a certain car, or your spouse for that matter, drives a certain car, you're much more likely to notice it on the street than any other car. Similarly, if you have one particular car that you're interested in, for example, for me, I really like Mustangs, the brand and the cars themselves, especially those from 66, 67, I notice them when they drive by, and I might not notice another similarly quality related car simply because my attention does not recognize it as something valuable to notice. So we truly do have an impact on the reality we experience. If you focus on positive thoughts, and I know this sounds like a bit of a woo-woo, but I would say it really actually works. If you notice on positive thoughts, if you notice on opportunities, if you think to yourself again and again, even when you cannot really prove it for yourself, that there is an opportunity for you out there, that there is a spouse for you out there, that there is a quality job for you, the perfect spot to live, the great friend that will embrace you with all their heart, you are opening yourself up with your attention to notice those things, experiences, and people when they happen to stumble upon you. Otherwise, it's almost like walking through life with, a blind on your eyes, because you cannot notice something that you've not considered to be of value to notice, because the world is so complex and there are so many things happening around you all the time that if you were to really scatter your mind in all directions, not knowing what to focus on, you would not only burn yourself out, but you would also probably miss the important things while focusing on those that are not important at all. So this idea here is we become, and our life becomes what we think about most of the time. If you give attention to, for example, writing a book, and you have an intention of writing it and then publishing it at some point, it will happen. It's just a matter of time, effort, consistency, and obviously a little bit of intention behind it to energize it. and attention that you need to give to it instead of maybe scrolling through TikTok. So yeah, this is the first big idea that I think really revolutionized my life, and I find it very profound and very practical. You can start with this right now. You can write down 5 things that you'd like to bring into your life and just start focusing on them a bit more. Just maybe come up with some plan about how to get those things, or, put yourself in those situations. And similarly, as you think about those things more often, you will find that there are more cues happening around you that seem like coincidences, but really they are just a shift in your perspective, because you start to notice things that were otherwise sort of unnoticed for you because you were just not focused in that direction. And this is a very, very powerful little tool that I'd like to share with you. Now, the second thing that I'd like to talk about is actually, I believe, the title of the last chapter, right? Let's see. No, it's the 18th out of 20 chapters. So the chapter is called The First Step Paradox. And there is a saying, or maybe like a used phrase, often commonly known phrase. I've heard it a couple of times. I think I've used it a couple of times as well. That the first step is the most difficult one. Like, to start is the biggest challenge, and then it only gets easier. I guess in many ways it does get easier if you do continue. But that if, in my opinion, is a make or break kind of a situation. So let me explain why I think it's a first step paradox. I believe that a mere first step as the most difficult thing is a myth that makes people feel better about starting things. And I don't want to take away from you. If you've just picked up this podcast and you've decided to listen to it because maybe this is something valuable for you, well done. That's a great first step. If you've just signed up for the new HIT class around your area, amazing. If you've just had your first piano lesson, awesome. The thing is though, one lesson, one episode, or 1 minute of the episode, or one HIT class, one gym session, will not make a change in your life. It might tickle your ego a bit, maybe empower you to feel like you're starting to change your life for the better. Maybe it will interest you, maybe even entertain you if it's a podcast or a film. But change, meaningful change and meaningful things, building something takes time. Your body needs apparently at least 3 months of regular exercise of any sort for you to even notice the first results. Your piano skills might take a week, might take a year of consecutive, and I say here with utmost importance, consecutive, persistent effort on your part, and not your teachers, to learn playing the piano. Listening to 1 minute of this episode might not even get you through the introduction. So, as much as it's great that you started, the fact that you finished after 2 minutes means that you've not really gained much from the hopefully quality discourse that I've put out for you here. And this sort of attitude, this perception that the first step is the most difficult one, I would argue is only relatable until you've done that first step, because obviously it is quite difficult to start something if you've never done it before. But the moment you start, I would say the most difficult thing is to finish it. And this is sincerely I think one of the biggest frustrations and pains that I do notice around me in the world. First of all, I wouldn't encourage anyone to sort of throw their words around, as we call it in Polish, sort of, throwing them out into the wind and not following through. I do not think it is a good quality to be unreliable. I would say that it's probably one of the worst qualities as, for example, a friend or a spouse to one another. If someone cannot rely on you, I don't really know what... Maybe you're enjoyable to be around. Maybe you're a bit of a joker that they can let the steam off next to you. But becoming reliable and becoming worthy and worthy of your words is really a big quality that I would encourage you to try and emulate and actually do so. So my idea of the first step paradox is, all right, fair enough, it's difficult for you to start, but the moment you start, don't end until you've got it. If you've set yourself the goal of losing 2 kilograms or becoming shredded or becoming blue belt in jiu-jitsu or becoming a piano player or learning one song to play on the piano, then do it. Finish the moment it is done. There are so many books, so many movies, so many ideas, inventions, abs and health potentials that are never done because our motivation withers out before we see the results. And this is the difficult part. This is the discipline that you need. This is the discipline that makes or breaks champions. You will never see anyone out there who made their career only on this tiniest one bit of luck as the only thing. It is impossible, simply. It just doesn't work that way. They might have had a lucky break every now and then. They might have known someone. They might have been genetically predisposed to be more slim than others. But ultimately, if they've become buffed, if they've become successful with their podcast, or if they've published a book, it is because they've had an intention, an attention, and self-discipline of persistence to finish. And it is so important, guys. I think I've recorded one episode, Finish What You Started, which I'll also link below. And truly, I would like to leave you with this. Whatever you want to do, and I don't mean to judge, whatever that is, I don't care. It can be the silliest, in your opinion, thing in the world. Whatever you want to do, you need to do it till the end. You need to finish it. If that's what you want to do, of course. If you don't want to do it, then don't mind it. Skip through. Maybe it's not something for you. Maybe you went once for the gym and well, that's awful. I don't want to do that. Fair enough. Maybe find some other sport or exercise to explore if that's what you're looking for. But finish what you started. This is so important. This is what makes a book to be published or not. And I sometimes have discussions with some of my friends or family members, and I remember one in particular when a friend of mine said that, I think she said something in between the lines of, she is in awe of my ability to continue with the podcast for so many years without seeing much results. And first of all, it sort of struck me a little bit like a bit of a sort of pinprick of pain, because well, what do you mean with no results? That's a bit upsetting. But then I've asked her, but what do you mean results? And why those results, whatever you mean they should be, you've put next to my wish to continue? And that really dug deeper into why she thought I'm doing what I'm doing here. And it's a very good question to ask yourself. Why do you do what you do? Because if you're gonna publish a book because you want to make $1 million out of that book, then I think you should find something else to do. Because that's not really a motivation that will make this process enjoyable. And even if you do manage to get it till the end, the likelihood, as we've seen last week, the probability of your book becoming a bestseller and getting you $1 million, whatever, is really, really highly unlikely. So if you rely on those so-called results for satisfaction out of this big feat of writing something, don't. It's just not the right motivation. And I'm not saying money gain is a good or a right motivation. It can be whatever you want it to be. But it's not necessarily, for example, for me, what drives me to continue. And oftentimes, especially at the very beginning, when I'm trying something new and then I become acquainted with it and then I sort of grow used to it, I find that unless I enjoy the process, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't have the strength to go, because if I didn't like my podcast, if I didn't think it was valuable to continue, even if there is only 20 people listening, because at some point there used to be 20 people, then I wouldn't continue, because obviously, well, look at those other big podcasts that are so huge and they have all the success and you don't. And I could tell myself, well, you're shit, do something else. But that's not what I'm doing here. That's not why I'm doing it. And whatever it is you do, whatever it is you decide to do, I would ask you why you do it. Because that why, as we've seen again and again in writings of Viktor Frankl or Jordan Peterson or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, your why will greatly determine your ongoing persistence. And as we've seen a moment ago, the first step might be the hardest one if you've never tried it before, but the moment you've done the first step, you need to do the second one and the third one and the 1001 and the 30,433. And at those times, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, if you're lying to yourself that at the end of the rainbow you'll find the golden pot, and because of it, that's the only reason why you're doing it, then you're unlikely to continue when the going gets tough. And I think it's just worth noting, just a little wake-up call to realize, to know, to not lie to yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And whatever that is, and whatever the reason for those things is, that's okay. But I would argue that it's better to know than not to know. So you have a higher chance of pursuing your goal successfully, let's say. So yeah, I hope that these two ideas and the little background about the book itself will be useful for you, maybe quite entertaining. I'll definitely have a little souvenir here, a little memory patch for myself for the future. Me talking about my own little literary experience. Now, if you'd like to get it, please do so. It's available on Amazon. If you'd like to follow the link below, you can find it on my Linktree account as well. And of course, feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts, or maybe write a comment saying how you liked it or how you liked this episode. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful week. Maybe just a brief mention as well. I'll probably over the next few weeks, because of my dissertation, I'll probably take a little bit of a break, probably around a month or so. So don't worry, I'm still here. I will probably start also the next season quite quickly, but I'll just not publish it straight away. And this is mostly due to the fact that it's vacation time. I have my dissertation coming up, and then in September I'm starting a new job. So over the next few weeks there will be a few more interviews that show up, really interesting ones, so please stay tuned and maybe catch up on the other episodes that we've mentioned before. And then I'll be back probably around August or September and we'll continue. So yeah, other than that, thank you so much, guys, for being with me and listening to this little ramble of a sort. Have a wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.